Hello, everyone. This is the Priceless Podcast. I'm the Priceless Podcast host, Michael Sechen. This podcast is made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. If you want to follow this podcast, you can follow it on Facebook and Instagram, and there is also a way for you to support this podcast through a donation. Subscribe, like, comment after you watch this video, because this helps people to see or that the video comes a little bit more higher on the top when someone searches for a topic like this. And of course, you can share this podcast with your friends, with people you know, or on your own or your Facebook page. Today with me, I have a new guest, of course, like for most of the episodes, and I forgot to ask how to pronounce the last name. The guest is from Sweden, and I'm gonna be brave and try it, Elin Westö.
That's so amazing. You're doing great.
Almost. Yeah. Welcome to the Priceless Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a part of this.
Well, today we're going to talk about a topic. I already had a guest where we touched a little bit on this topic, but every story is unique. And I'm so glad that I actually got your contact through a mutual friend, Oliver. Oliver was also a guest on this podcast. So thank you, Oliver, for connecting us, because I was so excited when you suggested Elin to be my guest. I'm going to say one word and you can answer with one word, or you can elaborate to this word. So the first word is identity.
My identity is asexual and aromantic. And I'm also a cis person, he, she pronouns.
And the second word is actually sexuality, but I think you already answered that with the first word.
Well, of course, the identity is much more than that, what I said, but my identity is also to be a Christian person. That's also part of me, so...
Yes. So you're reacting to my words up front. The next word is faith.
Yeah. And, well, I'm a Christian, and I'm also a Baptist evangelical Christian. Then, of course, the history of Christian movements around the Europe and world, they are different. So a Baptist in Sweden might be a bit different than in another country, but... That's my history. That's a part of my how my faith looks and how it works for me.
Church.
Well, it's a Baptist evangelical church I'm a member of right now, and I'm actually also a pastor in this church, but I'm not working as a pastor right now. But that's also part of my history as being a Christian, I guess. I've been educated as a leader, but right now I'm working with another job. So
relationships
are very important. It's a part of my story, coming to terms with being ARO-ACE, that you can't get stuck on one way of thinking of relationships. You have to explore and find relationships that works for you, and also put a lot of value to the relationships that you already have. And the relationship with yourself is also very important.
The last word is human rights.
Human rights, we should try to fight for them, I think. You can never feel that the work is done, because there are a lot of things to do.
You identify as aromantic and asexual, which is shortened ARO-ACE, so that we tell the people when we say, or when you say ARO-ACE, or what it means.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means, maybe in general, but also for you in your life?
Mm-hmm. So it's actually very new for me. to identify this way. I started to identify as asexual aromantic in the beginning of 2021, and I was 37 years old at the time. And I had only recently before that started to learn about what asexuality and aromanticism is, because I ordered books from the library in December 2020 to find out what asexuality was all about. I had this struggle within myself that I have actually never understood my own sexuality, and when I was 37 years old, it had really become a problem for me, because I was wondering, why can I never make a connection relationship with another person? Why can I make my sex life work? And also I had the experience that I've never been in love or experienced any romance feelings. And I was thinking that this is so weird, because I'm not a person who is afraid of taking contact with other people. Well, I couldn't find anything that was wrong with me, but I was struggling with this inside of me. I listened to a lot of people talking about books, and they always talked about LGBTQIA+. And I was thinking that, well, that A, the first thing I learned was that it was that it meant asexual, and then I also thought that, is there something about that asexual? Maybe I was drawn to it, of course, but at the same time, I was so determined that there's no way that I could be asexual. It will be great to be asexual, because then I don't have to feel this pressure of making things happen. But I was convinced that I couldn't be asexual, because I used to. I can put it this way, that all my life I've been having strong feelings of libido, or the sexual area, how do you say, but my problem for me has been that I felt the strong needs and strong feelings in this area, but I never met the person that I wanted to have sex with. And of course, I learned now that that's the part of attraction. When I heard about asexuality, I was thinking, well, I should learn about every identity. So of course, I need to learn about this as well. It was a book called ACE by Angela Chen, and a book called The Invisible Orientation by Sondra. The books came to my house December 2020, and it was an extremely emotional experience, because it was like opening a book that was about me, my experience. And the thing that made me so emotional is that I've never heard about this. I never been able to relate to when people talk about sexualities and how that works. All of a sudden, I could read about things and I actually could understand myself. I learned that asexuality is a spectrum, that a lot of people have a lot of different experiences. I learned the definition that asexuality is when you feel little or non-sexual attraction. And a lot of asexual people can be described as they identify as being non-sexual, or they don't have any libido or thoughts about sex at all or anything. Maybe they don't even want to hear about it, because it's not about that there's something wrong with sex, of course, but they don't feel that themselves. A lot of asexual people, they don't have positive associations to the thing. But of course, they are open to that others have a sex life, of course. So that's something important to say. But there are also asexual people who have a strong feeling of libido. They might enjoy sexual in fiction and in media, or think about it, or taking care of themselves maybe to their needs. But they don't feel sexually attracted to other people. And there are also people who are in the gray areas, gray sexual or demisexual, who do experience sexual attraction in very rare circumstances. demisexuals need a strong emotional bond to someone to feel attracted to them. And gray sexuals then can feel sexual attraction, but very few times in their lives maybe. And then there are a lot of micro labels, because I think the micro labels, the identities within the asexual spectrum, is a way for asexual people to explore themselves, to communicate that, well, I'm asexual, but I experience this in this particular way. That also meant a lot to learn, and I found my own experience in that kind of one of the micro identities. And the thing was that I also listened to the podcast called ARO-ACE, which are interviews with asexual and aromantic people. And there was one episode when people talk about this kind of experience that I relate to. And it was the first time I ever heard someone else saying that they experienced that way. Being aromantic is not the same thing as being asexual, but it's an identity where you don't feel romantic attraction, which is being in love or loving someone in a romantic way. And that's also a spectrum that you can feel. You can be gray romantic, for example. You can feel romantic attracted to someone, but very few times in your life, and so on. But for me, it was a very strong experience to learn about aromantic, because I didn't even need to think about it, because when I read the word and the definition on the page, I immediately knew that is me. I didn't know there was a word for someone like me. I actually, there was also something that was a very overwhelming experience, that there is a word for for me that I didn't know about. And also that I learned that there are other peoples like me. There is a community. I can talk to people. So the book, The Invisible Orientation, made suggestions to find people who were, the author mentioned AVEN, the Asexuality, Visibility and Education Network, which is a website with the address asexuality.org, very easy to remember. And there was information about asexuality, but you were also able to write in a forum. So I very nervously wrote that, oh my God, I read these books. I think this is me. I'm 37 years old. What should I do? And can I be here to learn and talk to people? Because the thing is that I've always seen myself as a straight person. And now I was beginning to think that, no, it's wrong. I might be I'm not heteronormative. I'm something else. But I was so nervous because I thought, I'm 37 years old. How are you going to do this? And could I be a part of this community? I was so nervous, but everyone was so nice to me. The asexual people, they sent me pictures of cakes, because cake is a very important symbol of the ace community. And there was also suggestions of an aromantic forum, and it's called ARO-ACE, which I really love, because of course I'm a Christian. I've heard of the apocalypse before, and I'm also a lover of zombie movies. So I was very connected. I loved that it was called ARO-ACE. And it was the same thing there. I wrote a message, and so there was a person reaching out to me, and they were saying to me that, well, we are a few people starting an aromantic discussion group in a video app. So you're welcome to be a part of it if you want to. I thought that this is amazing. This is the next step, to talk about other people about this. Then I will know if this is true or not. But I was so nervous because I was going to talk in English, because it was an international group. And I was so nervous also because I thought I have always had such a huge respect for queer people. I was so nervous because I thought, wow, I'm going to sit there with queer, aromantic people. And of course, it will be very obvious if I don't belong in there. But of course, they were very nice to me, and they knew that this was new for me. And the thing that made me so emotional was actually that they didn't need to say that much, and I didn't say very much in the start either, but I just felt at home. I felt that I belonged there because they were talking about intimacy, relationships, feeling, and everything like that. And I also become very aware that all my life I've been feeling like an outsider. And when people talk about their falling in love and their love stories, and also about their sex life and feelings, people talk a lot about that in the growing up as a teenager and being a young adult. And even if you are an adult in your 30s, of course, it's very present in every conversations. So to be able to meet a group of people that actually get you, and they were saying things that I could relate to, that was actually very overwhelming. I was also quite nervous because I wanted to introduce myself as a Christian, because that's a huge part of who I am. And I said I'm an LGBTQIA plus affirming Christian. It's very hard to say in English. But the leader of this group said that, well, I'm a Christian as well. And they're from Britain and they're from the Catholic Church. But they also said that even in the LGBTQ affirming communities in church, you are going to be aware that the aromantic perspective is not always recognized or have a place for that. So I really appreciate that I also got that contact, that I could just know that there are even aromantic Christian people. So I could relate to, of course. In the year of 2021, it was very dramatic. I went through this identity crisis, and I was really feeling that everything was, there is something happening when you realize something about your identity that wasn't clear for you, even for you. And then I also made the decision to come out because I wanted to, of course, but there were a lot of questions. I also became very aware that I'm going through this identity crisis, and even if people are friendly and open to that, they won't understand what it's like. They can't understand what I'm going through. I had such a strong need to talk to people. It was kind of like this experience made my everything that I pushed aside inside of myself came bursting out, and I was having such a strong need to talk about this, to talk to others, to explore this, of course, and I realized that even if I have friends who are nice to me, they won't be prepared to listen to me all this that I need to talk about. And I was trying to see if there was an asexual or aromantic communities in Sweden, and I was trying to find, there was not a group in my town or anything like that. But I came in touch with a few people on the internet, and I also decided that maybe I could start a digital group myself, because, there was a pandemic and I thought everyone is starting digital book clubs. Maybe I can start one discussing these books that I read myself. And I was writing in a few Facebook page that if you're interested, you can be a part of this asexual and aromantic book club. And I had no idea, because I started a Discord server and I was thinking maybe a couple of persons would like to discuss with me. But actually there came in a lot of people, and I think we were 20 people in the start of it, and they were sharing their personal stories. And one person had just recently come to learn about this himself, and I was feeling quite scared because I was thinking that because I have a history of being a pastor, I was thinking, well, I should be a leader. I should take care of all of these people. And I was afraid because I knew that I can't, because I was broken apart in the inside myself. But then I realized I don't need to take care of anyone. I'm just a lost person like everybody else in the need of talking to people about this. I just want to make sure, of course, that people say the right pronouns and respect each other and everything like that. But that was not going to be a problem. So in the spring of 2021, we had conversations online almost every week because they wanted also to talk about this so badly. And we were discussing sexuality, romantic orientation, relationships, the longing for meaningful relationships. How can you tell if you're feeling attraction or not? If you don't know what it is, then how can you tell? And what is the difference between romantic attraction and sexual attraction? That's also very hard to figure out. Also, a lot of asexual and aromantic people are polyamorous as well. So we talked about that kind of relationships too. And I was very overwhelmed because one person told me in the end of the season that that person was able to talk about her sexuality for the first time in her life, but without feeling panic attacks or anxiety about it. And that is also something that I carry with me, that this is so important to talk about, because I was 37 years old. I didn't know about this. Other people who are in their late 20s or 30s or something like that, they also haven't been able to talk about their sexuality or relationships, and that's actually very serious. I have this kind of expectation that in Sweden we do know about queer identities, and we know that there is a diversity in sexuality and orientations, but then I realized that when it comes to asexuality and aromanticism, there is so much lack of knowledge and awareness, and asexual and aromantic people, they don't know if they're going to be included or not, and it's very stressful to know, am I accepted in this queer community or not? And if I say that I'm asexual, will people know about what it is, or do I need to explain myself? And when it comes to aromanticism, the awareness is even smaller. The problem for asexual people in Sweden is that if you dare to identify as asexual as your orientation, you have to be prepared to explain yourself, of course, and you have to be prepared that even if you go to healthcare where they have pride flags and they have the LGBTQ certificate, you need to be prepared that if you say that you're aromantic or asexual, the healthcare giver could still say to you that no, that's not a valid orientation. You're just in need for treatment, and that this is a abnormality, that this is a defect, that you need treatment. And in some places they do know about asexuality, but a lot of times they don't. So that is the stress that you experienced all the time. And when I was in this, when I was arranging these book club conversations, I was very hurt when I heard young people who maybe they were trans people as well, and or cis people, that they told that they were going to a healthcare appointment and they were expecting to be treated like a valid queer person, but when they say that they were asexual, they heard that no, it's a part of a disease. It's not a valid orientation. When I came out in this Christian organization that I'm a part of, I realized that people were very friendly and validating and encouraging, but a lot of people didn't know about what asexuality and aromanticism was. So I volunteered to make a PowerPoint presentation on one of our events where I explained the identities and the spectrums and the pride flags and tried to educate, I guess. A few people asked me if I wanted to make that kind of presentation on Stockholm Pride as well. So I did that as well. I was very overwhelmed because I was thinking, how can I do that? I'm just recently just know about this. But I also felt very validated to be taken seriously in this way. And I was encouraged by the community, the friends that I come to, that I got to know through the book club and everything. So I was feeling the support of them. So it all started with me wanting to do something, wanted to be an ally, wanted to do some kind of activism, because I think this is a passion of me, that everyone needs the same rights and everything. And then I didn't expect to find myself within the LGBTQ spectrum, but I did. And now I guess I have a passion for telling about this. I dare to make my own definition of my life and my orientation. I dare to stand in front of other LGBTQ people or allies and present this as my identity. And I feel very strong, because before this happened in my life, I was always afraid that people would ask me about my sex life or sexuality, and I've been carrying a lot of shame inside of myself all my life. But now I have the power that I can actually tell people I'm asexual, I'm aromantic.
Before we continue, I have to ask one question, because you mentioned that the cake is a very important symbol for AROACE. Can you explain what the cake means?
The cake is, I think, is a way of, queer identities always make jokes, to joke about what's different about them. And so the cake is actually comes from when people say that sex and romance is the most important thing in life for human beings. Then the asexual and aromantic people just ask the world, but what about cake? What's more wonderful in life than cake? And the fun part is that I think a lot of people who are not asexual and aromantic would agree that cake actually is better than sex. Yes, I think it's also some kind of a way of, with the humor and sense of humor, that you make things less dramatic, that you think that people are reacting towards asexual and aromantic people, that, well, you're just not normal, you need this in your life to have a fulfilled life. And then you say that, no, I'm fine, I have cake, I live a very wonderful life. So that's, I love that kind of humor. And I've been enjoying a lot to read through ACE and ARO memes and jokes on the internet, because I think it's so liberating to laugh at yourself.
Jokes and humor, that's very powerful. I think it's a great way to turn around things. Another thing you mentioned and you talked about is that you were 37 when you found out about your ARO-ACE identity. What do you think makes it so hard to actually figure out that someone, or that you yourself, is ARO-ACE?
Yes, I think it's easier for the young people of today, because there are much more representation coming in books and TV series, and the very famous Netflix series Heartstopper is made by an asexual aromantic author called Alice Osman, and she has promised that for the second season she has big asexual plans to give the representation of even that queer identity in the show. And that, of course, means a lot. And But the problem with the queer identities, to learn about them, I think it's a lot of books and TV shows are in English. And even if a lot of people and young people are familiar with English, can read in English in Sweden and so on, of course there are people who don't. So it would be nice if there were more information about asexuality and aromanticism in Swedish. And I think also it's because the asexuality is not talked about as much if you have education in LGBTQ identities in your school or in your education, then asexuality is not always included. And there are a lot of misconceptions about asexuality that is unfortunate. And I think I've learned that, the LGBTQ movement, of course, it's a result of a lot of people's fighting for their rights. And I think maybe it's harder for asexual people who are a minority, even within the LGBTQ community. You need allies that also think this is important. I learned that even if people are talking about asexuality, it's not always the correct definition. A lot of times people are talking about asexuality without even asking advice from the ace community, which is very unfortunate because I've heard a lot of the definitions on asexuality that asexual people, they don't have a sexuality at all. And that is very alienating because even if they could be right for a lot of asexual people, it's not right for everyone. And by using that kind of definition, you're also erasing a lot of asexual people. Like, for example, I never thought I could be asexual because I do have a sexuality, I do have sexual experiences. It's just not connected to attraction to someone else. That's very important when you talk about asexuality and aromanticism and any other queer identity, that you try to respect that it's actually a diversity within the identity. To answer your question, I think that there needs to be more information about asexuality and aromanticism, that people become more aware of that this experience also exists within humanity. I think if you are going to educate about asexuality, you don't need to be asexual yourself, but you should make sure to take your information from a true source. You should listen to asexual and aromantic people themselves. You can have as many definitions and textbooks and explanations as a lot of that kind of things, but I think that people really begins to understand when they listen to a person's personal story. I would recommend Oliver's video on the YouTuber Queers of the World, because that video is very important to know that asexual people are considered, we are not considered to be valid. We are considered to be that there is something wrong with us. So asexual people needs to defend themselves all the time to say that, no, I'm not, my orientation is just as it is. It's not caused by anything. And that makes it also very hard for people who maybe struggle with mental issues, or maybe they have bad experiences in the past. And if there are questions all the time that, well, you can't be asexual, that there needs to be a cause. Maybe there's some mental illness based behind, or maybe you have a bad sexual experience in your baggage. Of course, that's very hard for a person who actually maybe have that kind of experiences. But unfortunately, I know that it can be hard for people to accept asexuality, even within the LGBTQ community. because there are misconceptions that asexuality is about a negative view of sex. That we are trying to say that sex is wrong, or that we are anti-sex, which we are not. I've never met another person who is asexual who doesn't fight for the rights of every queer identity to be in love with anyone that they are in love with, or to have sex with the person that you want to have sex with, of course. But I see that kind of reaction sometimes, that we cannot include asexuality because it means that we get a negative view on sex, and that's very unfortunate. And I also feel that people can get tired of learning, that they say that, oh, do I really need to learn about another identity? The LGBTQIA+, it's too many letters. I don't have the energy to learn. And it makes me so sad, because when I see that there are so much diversity in humanity, then I actually become happy. When I meet someone who is having another experience than I have, I want to learn. I want to listen to that person. I am happy that they are here, that they are different. I get so disappointed when we in the church have the attitude that, oh, do we really need to talk about this? I had a moment in January that when the leader of my local church, where I actually used to work as a pastor before, but I quit my job of other reasons than this, but I'm still a member of that church. And one of the church leaders called me to say that, well, I've seen on Instagram that you've been finding yourself. Oh, how wonderful. But this is nothing important that you need to talk about. I was so hurt by her comment, because I thought that, who is she to say that this is nothing important to talk about? Being a part of church means a lot to me. And I thought that we were a community that would celebrate the diversity in humanity, that we would take every person seriously, because that is the view I have of God, that God thinks that every person is so important, that God gave his own life for every person. And of course, asexual and aromantic people have always existed, but the language in which people are identifying themselves are evolving all the time. But I also think that's the fantastic thing about the queer community, that you can express yourself, that you dare to identify yourself. I just love to see the young people who are daring to identify themselves as asexual, even though there could be an expert or a doctor telling them that, no, this is not an orientation. But they dare to put their own words on themselves anyway. I've been working with my flags. There's always someone asking me, but what do these flags mean? And I've been talking to people who are, maybe they are there as allies, or they are LGBTQ people themselves. And I explained to them, this is the asexual flag, this is the aromantic flag. Asexuality is about not feeling sexual attraction. Aromantic is about not feeling romantic attraction. And maybe people have heard about asexuality, but they really, I recognize that doubting gaze in the eyes when I tell them about aromanticism. They just, oh, I don't know what that is. But it was so validating, because I was walking in the Pride Parade on Örebro, which is the town where I live. And there was an ally there who asked me about the flags. And when I told her about the aromantic flag, I just saw in her eyes that no, she doesn't believe this is the thing. But I was walking there anyway. And then at the end of the parade, there was a young person running up to me saying, oh, I love your flags. I'm an aromantic person myself. And then I felt so proud that I was walking there, because another a young person could see my flag and see themselves. There was another time when I worked on Malmö Pride. I was walking with the asexual flag, and I heard a comment behind my back saying, "Oh, is that really something to be proud of?" And I just felt that I am proud of this. I am proud of myself. When I have my days when I struggle with shame or regret or feeling lonely or something like that, I have these memories when I've been walking with the flags, and I've been so happy and proud, and that it also brings me to connect with other people who also see themselves in these identities.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear. We already talked and some things when we met the first time on Zoom, and you mentioned this, and it's just fascinating in one way, not in a good way, that people who experienced what it means when someone says this is not something to be proud of.
Yeah.
I, as a gay person, know this feeling when someone says this, because that's the message that I got and that I was growing up with. And then I'm willing to say it to another person, to something I don't understand. I think about the thing that you talked, that people are maybe not willing to learn about new things. I understand that people maybe don't have the capacity to learn about everything or about every sexuality, identity, that it can be too much. I know I talked to some people and said, I just don't have the time to know everything, and there is more and more and more, and there's so many things, and I'm already committing myself to learn so much about something else. So I can understand that, but what I would like to encourage people is just to be respectful. I don't have to know everything about ARO-ACE to be respectful towards whatever you say, especially if I don't understand and I can't look at you through my experience. Am I going to completely understand you? Probably not. I'm never going to understand 100% what it means to be ARO-ACE, because I'm not ARO-ACE. But I can do my best and also be careful that when I listen to another ARO-ACE person or whatever identity or sexuality, to take into account that it will be a different experience. And that's the spectrum. Not to expect, but just to hear, okay, how was life for you?
Yes.
And that's all I need.
Yes, and also when it comes to minorities, that of course you can understand people don't have the energy or capacity to learn about everything. But just to think about, because I was becoming more aware of myself, that I put a lot of effort to listen to heteronormative stories and people telling me about what they feel, who they are attracted to and who they are not, and heartbreak stories. Of course I want to make effort to listen to the persons who are important to me, my friends, my family members, and everything. And of course I think it's important in church that we talk about these things, families, relationships, and everything. But if I take a minute to say something about, well, I've discovered I work in this way, I've been quiet about my sexual orientation and feelings of intimacy and the need for connection all my life, because I haven't understood it. And now I have words for it. I can express myself. And then to hear someone say that, no, you don't need to talk about this, it's not important. Then of course, I've been telling myself that I should try to look for the places where I do feel validated and welcome, that I do feel that I belong, because I guess something happen in me when people are actually listening to me, relating to my experiences, saying that, oh, this is so important to talk about because I'm like that myself. I think I don't have to be a part of a community that says we don't have space for this, we don't have energy to learn about this or talk about this. Okay, I'm not going to crash their space or anything, but what I would like is for to find communities that actually celebrate that we are different and have the capacity of actually listening to each other, I guess. If I would be a part of creating a kind of community, I would try to have the attitude that we should respect the diversity, that we should make an effort to listen to other people. You know, I'm a white person. I can never understand what it's like to be a victim of racist abuse, for example. But I could be respectful and say that, well, I cannot say something about this. We need to listen to other people. We need to learn about this so we can make sure that a person can feel safe in our community. You know, during this process, when I exploring my asexual and aromantic identity, I met so many queer people who have taught me about their identity. And that means that I've been accepting myself more and loving my own experience more. So actually, I think it's validating to learn about other identities. We can't afford to be without some pieces of the puzzle that is humanity.
You know, one question that comes to mind, and this is not to be disrespectful, it's just an interest. You know, I think a huge problem for us who are not at the ARO-ACE spectrum is the understanding it just looks so lonely.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that? Like, aren't you lonely?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting because I'm struggling with this myself, to not think of myself as I'm going to end up lonely, because that is my biggest fear in life. And that was the biggest problem for me when I was trying to figure out, why do I never feel attracted to anyone? Why do I never fall in love with someone? This is so... I was in fear of being lonely, becoming bitter, becoming, you know, a needy person and a bitter person and a jealous person. Yeah, it is a problem because it is a struggle for, of course, asexual and aromantic people to find relationships that are meaningful. We need to see where the problem is. The problem is the norms of society. The norm amatonormativity, which is the norm that every human experience sexual and romantic love, and that kind of relationship is the center of every person's life. That is a very strong norm, and that is also the norm that makes doctors tell asexual people that this is something that needs to get treated because can't be a normal human life. And of course, asexual and aromantic people are struggle with the feeling of loneliness because of the norms that are pressuring in society. In earlier times, there was the norms that only heterosexual relationships was valid, and people who were gay were told that you're going to end up lonely if you keep on being the way you are. But now we have hope because same-sex marriages are even affirmed in church. You can get married in church. You don't need to feel that, as a young person, you don't need to feel that if I'm gay, that I'm going to end up lonely and sad. And, you know, maybe you are asexual and you are romantically attracted to other people. How can you find a partner who will accept you as asexual, respect your boundaries? Maybe you can make the intimate life work because, but then the asexual person needs to feel respected, of course. And they shouldn't be the one in the relationship making all the compromise, maybe. And aromantic people who are not asexual, who are sexually attracted to other people but not romantically, how can they feel that their relationships are just as valid as any other relationship? That doesn't mean that they are shallow. That doesn't mean that they are unloving, because you're just loving each other in a different kind of way. And as an ARO-ACE person, as myself, I live on my own in my apartment, but I have becoming to see my relationships in another perspective. For example, that you don't have to have one significant other to spend your whole life with. You can have a network of friends. You can value the relationships you have with your friends. Maybe they are the love of your life. Maybe you can create some kind of community that will give you the emotional support that you need. Because as for myself, I am struggling with the emotional needs that I do have and the emotional support that I do need for other people. And I am in a situation where I'm 39 years old, and the society is, there are such strong norms that these kind of emotional support, intimacy, family life, practical life, you share your economy, even a thing like that is within the romantic sexual relationship. And that becomes a struggle because you do have needs. You have a need of a hug. You have a need of an intimacy contact. You have a need of someone to talk to when you come home from work, and you just have to say to someone that, I have a terrible day at work, Before I knew I was aromantic and asexual, I have the problem that I was trying to pressure myself into trying to find the solution. I need to feel these kind of feelings for someone, otherwise I will end up lonely. But the difference in learning about these identities is that I know that, okay, I don't feel that kind of attraction. I don't have to pressure myself because there's nothing wrong with me. I just need to find other ways to make this kind of relationships to fill my needs. We have attitudes in our society that a person who doesn't find the romantic love must be miserable. So you have that kind of message through movies and media all the time. So you need to detox your mind. I have a friend who expresses when they started to identify as aromantic, they were starting to rewrite their life in their own language. That is something that I work with really hard right now, to rewrite my life in my own, to change perspective. Maybe I need different kinds of relationships. That would be a solution that is possible for me. I started to think that even a person who is in a heterosexual romantic marriage, they fear ending up lonely as well, because you don't have the guarantee that the relationship will last all forever, and maybe you will die alone anyway because your partner might not live as long as you do. It would be nice to also see representation of asexual and aromantic people who are living their life without the romantic relationship, for example, but they are living a very fulfilled life anyway. But even if I can talk to you about it, and I sound so smart, right? Sounds so wise, but actually I do struggle myself, because that is the internalized shame, I think. It means a lot to be in contact with other asexual and aromantic people, because when you are able to find people that you can talk to who actually understands what you're going through, then it becomes an easier burden to bear.
loneliness is a universal human feeling, and being in a relationship doesn't mean that you never feel lonely. Especially if your relationship doesn't really work, you can feel extremely lonely. And even as a person that does have feelings of romantic feelings and am sexually attracted to other people, I always disliked this pressure that is within society of you have to pair up.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is healthy even for, straight, gay, whoever, to have such a huge pressure of being paired up. And I actually believe that this is something where we can actually learn from ARO-ACE people, something that you can give us is a bigger freedom that I don't have to be paired up. I don't have to be 16 and have my pair. I don't have to be 25 and have my pair. It's fine if it happens with 35. Just take this pressure away. So I don't think that's a healthy thing. And talking about this, what you can give us or society in general, I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the superpower of ARO-ACE people, meaning like the advantages that you see of being ARO-ACE?
Oh my goodness. When you say that, I just feel the strong feeling of pride, I guess. It's when I first learned about aromanticism and asexuality, I was out walking on the countryside and I was just listening to music, trying to figure out what will this mean for my future. And I was very worried, and I was praying to God, what is going to happen in my life? And then I was just so overwhelmed with this feeling of euphoria that I was just feeling that even there are challenges and struggles, at least I don't have to be someone that I'm not. I get to be myself. And that is, I think that is something that is very strong, to be able to identify as take control of your own experience, the feeling of there's nothing wrong with me, I'm valid, I'm enough in myself, to experience that kind of self-acceptance and self-love, and asexual and aromantic people have a lot to give to others. For example, asexual people can give you a piece of cake and tell you that, well, sex is not the most important thing in life. There are so many other important things. Don't worry. And for same thing with romantic love, it's a very important and strong feelings for those who experience that, but life is so much more than that. And human relationships are so much more than romantic relationships, that you can start to value your friendship, that you can start to allow yourself to love your friend in such, you can feel such a strong love for your friends, and you are allowed, it's okay to love your friend that much. It's okay to have that kind of strong connection with your friends. It doesn't mean that relationship is less than the romantic one. It can be something that you really appreciate, an important part of your life. What does love even mean? We say the word love, it's kind of like a word that everyone should know what it means, but maybe not. There are aromantic people who are actually calling themselves loveless arrows because they are challenging the concept of love. They want to find new definitions of what it means to care for each other and to live in relationships. And I just think that's so amazing, because that makes us have to think what is the thing that we really need. And when you say that you love, your friend or your spouse or anything, what does that really mean? When we talk about the love of God, what does that mean? And how to love your neighbor, what does that mean? There is something so powerful in finding pride in yourself, even if society says that this is nothing that exists, or even if a doctor says that this is unnormal, then people are protesting against that and walking in pride parades, being proud of who they are anyway. And I learned so much when I've been in this aromantic video group, because there are aromantic people who are not asexual. The aromantic perspective would be that sexuality has a value in itself. It doesn't have to be in a romantic relationship. Sexuality is a beautiful thing. And I think that God created sexuality to be a beautiful thing in itself, to be enjoyed in the way that is very personal for every person, of course. If you want to learn about love and sexuality and relationships more, you should need the ACEs and AROs. I just want to say and encourage, go find yourself some ACEs and AROs. They are so important, I think.
That's the thing, you know. It's what you said. That's why you love diversity. That's why I love diversity. But the problem with diversity is that you put questions in my mind.
Yeah, but that's so amazing, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. If you are naturally a person who likes questions, I love questions. But I met people who dislike questions, especially if they have to question themselves. And you're actually putting questions into my sexual life, my romantic life, you know, and they're coming up these questions. What is actually love? What is actually being romantic? What is, you know, so I don't want to deal with that. I just want my life to be easy, have no questions.
Well, yeah, but imagine if you would just sit in your own living room, content with what you know about romantic love, sexual love, and you know yourself, and you say that to yourself that I don't want any more questions. I don't want to learn anything more about human life. It actually sounds to me very lonely. So I could ask other people who are not ARO-ACE, oh, it sure does seem a bit lonely, right? Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I am a person that loves questions. What should I say? So I get it, what you say. Yes.
Otherwise you wouldn't have this podcast.
Yes. So we have to slowly end this interview. But before we end, I want to give you a chance, if you have anything that's really important for you to say about this topic and you didn't have the chance to share it. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I would just want to say that being asexual and aromantic is something to be really proud of. And I would like to say to any asexual and aromantic person maybe listening that I just want to say that you are an important person, and your experience of sexuality and romantic orientation or a lack of of that, that's how you identify, I would just like to say that it is really important to talk about. And I would wish for you to meet the attitude of others, other LGBTQ Christians or allies or anyone, that if you dare to come out and tell that, well, I come to know that I'm ARO-ACE, I don't know what to do, that you get the support that you need and that you get listened to. And if you don't feel that way, I would just like to encourage you that there are other asexual and aromantic people out there. We should find each other, we should talk about it. And for myself, I would love to get in touch with aromantic Christian people to talk about how does the theology, how can an aromantic theology looks like. That would be so amazing to talk about. And I would like to say to other LGBTQ Christians or allies that, well, it's okay to not know everything, of course. It's okay to not know every asexual and aromantic joke or pride flag or identity or ways of explaining things or anything. But I would love that we as Christians or humans even, that we meet each other with the respect and we are willing to learn and listen to each other. That's something that gives me hope.
Elin,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I experienced so many things you said as really vulnerable, and I'm so thankful for the gift. You know, I always have this image of a really nice wrapped box with a nice ribbon around. Actually, thank you for the cake.
You're welcome.
Your story and what you shared was really a beautiful cake, a very nice tasting cake. Thank you for letting us into your process, into your life, into everything you shared from your inside. And yeah, as you can hear, I'm just thankful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you. I would like to say thank you to you that you bring up this topic and that you are showing the interest, because I think it would mean a lot to other ACEs and AROs to see that, oh, the Priceless podcast, you think this is important to have in your podcast. That's so amazing, I think. Yeah.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your thank you back. Thank you, dear viewers and listeners, for being with us today. As I said in the beginning, this podcast was made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and now it's also the time to comment to what you heard and maybe about sharing. Maybe you want to share a little bit of your own experience. And don't forget to share to others who might be interested in this topic. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. So we are at the end. Oh, one more thing. All the links, Elin mentioned so many things, links, books, there will be in the podcast description. So don't forget to check it out. And don't forget to support this podcast. So see you next time. Bye, everyone. And bye, Elin.
Bye-bye.